Good afternoon. My name is Christina Farmer, and I serve as the Program Director for our College of Agriculture and Natural Resources with the University Career Center and the President's Promise. Welcome to today's career panel, Careers in Environmental Justice. We have a full panel of environmental justice professionals that are here to talk to you about their careers. Before we get started, we have a little bit of housekeeping that we would like to do. First is signing in. So students, if you can look in the chat or on the screen, you'll notice that we have a sign in for students. If you can copy the link that's in the chat, type in your UID and press enter, it will work for you. Other housekeeping notes, the event, as I mentioned, is going to be recorded. We're asking that you mute your microphones as well as your videos so we can focus on the panelists. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to submit those questions in the chat. So we'll give students a few minutes to open your browsers, copy the URL that's in the chat, and sign in. We'll also be posting it towards the end of the presentation as well, so that you are able to sign in and we'll be able to log your attendance. So thank you for logging in. Now we will have our introductions of our panelists. So, our panelists, can you please introduce yourselves and give us a brief overview of your educational and work background? Why don't we start off with Jameson?
Hello, everybody. How you doing? My name is Jameson Davis. I'm a 3 at Vermont Law School currently. I'm from Hamden, Connecticut. At Vermont Law School, I also received my Master's of Environmental Law and Policy in 2018. While also attending Vermont Law School, I was one of the co-founders, there was 7 co-founders of the Environmental Justice Law Society, also known as EJLS. I had the pleasure and privilege of serving as a select board member for the town of Hartford in Vermont. And in the past, I served as an intern for the Vermont Attorney General's Office for Chesapeake Legal Alliance, and I'm currently at the United States Department of Justice in the environment sector, Environment and Natural Resources Division. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jameson. Alano.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elena Chuney. It's okay. I guess I'll start a little bit about my background. I attended Michigan State University, where I studied social relations and policy and environmental public policy. I then went on to attend law school and attended law school at Western Michigan University, where I focused on environmental law. I have had the opportunity to work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, where I created my position as the first environmental justice attorney. And then I switched gears and went into more policy and community-based work, where I created my position at an international organization known as NAMATI, where I was the first environmental justice director for that program. Now I am with the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, and I work primarily with state legislators on environmental issues around the Mississippi River, and we are trying to increase awareness around environmental justice communities in that arena. So I am very happy to be here with you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Tuana.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tuana Phillips. I got my undergraduate degree in environmental science, and then went on to work. I wanted to do work related to water. So went on to work in forestry, healthy watersheds, and then eventually went back to school for my master's. And I studied actually at the University of Maryland for my master's under an urban ecologist. My studies were focused on urban tree canopy. And after that, had the opportunity to come back to the Chesapeake region, which is where I was before my graduate studies. And I'm now working for the EPA at the Chesapeake Bay Program Office. I work on diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work, as well as other things, including some grant work and local engagement work. But I'll be talking more today about my work specifically with diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, DEIJ, and environmental justice.
Thanks so much, Tuana. Mariah.
Hey everybody, I'm Mariah Davis. I'm the Policy and Campaigns Manager for the Choose Clean Water Coalition, which is a program of National Wildlife Federation. I'm originally from Virginia and did my undergrad studies at VCU. I got an environmental studies degree there and got a minored in chemistry, and find myself doing some outdoor education, a lot of outreach work, doing some state and federal level advocacy. I'm actually a student right now at University of Maryland in the School of Public Policy. I'm getting like an executive master's degree in public management.
Awesome, thank you. Bakura, and I know I said that right. Wrong, I'm sorry. Just 1 second, you're muted. Okay.
You said it right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. You said it right, by the way. Thank you all for having me. My name is Bakura Shabazz. I am currently a board member with the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative. I am the chairwoman over the social justice and health disparities with the Virginia Green New Deal, and the chairperson for internal policy with the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative. I'm currently studying at John Tyler Community College. I'm one of the senior members of the collaborative. And I kind of got involved with this work being an impacted and marginalized community member out of Newport News, Virginia, where I was born and raised. I currently reside in Chesterfield, and I have done a lot of work with Choose Clean Water and the National Wildlife Foundation, and I was the state lead for the Virginia Conservation Network on climate sea level rise in the state of Virginia.
Thank you, welcome. And last but not least, Cynthia.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to get the opportunity to have a dialogue with you all. So I'm Cynthia Ferguson. I got my undergrad degree in mechanical engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. Then I worked for 7 years in the chemical industry. First couple years as a mechanical engineer, and then I got into the safety, health, and environmental field for that company. Then about, like I said, the 7th year, decided to go to law school. I had to do a lot of praying about that. I was like, really, Lord, I'm leave my job, go to law school. So I went to law school out in Chicago Kent College of Law, and had the opportunity, I think it was my last couple years there, they started an environmental law clinic, and that's where I got really first exposed to environmental justice concerns. I applied right out of law school to Department of Justice, the honors program. So I came in, I said, right out of law school through that program into the Environment and Natural Resources Division, where Jameson is currently with us there. And I started in the environmental enforcement section, within the division that handles the civil affirmative work. And I had a couple of details, one of which was to our Assistant Attorney General's office, back in, you know, about 2008. And interestingly enough, during that time, the focus on environmental justice really crystallized, and my division started to take a number of steps to really focus on that. And one of the things that they did was to create the position that I now hold, which is a senior litigator within the division, and I focus on environmental justice. And so I get the opportunity to work with not just my civil enforcement section, but all of the different sections within the environment division. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So we have a wide variety of career professionals that is currently on today. I have a few questions that I have prepared for the panelists. And then after I ask those prepared questions, then students, you can feel free to ask your questions as well. So you can put them in the chat and we'll make sure that we answer them. The first question that I want to pose to the panelists is, how do you define environmental justice? And specifically talk about it within the scope of your role and your organization. So why don't we start with Elena?
For me, I would describe, well, let's back up. I think it's important to be able to say what environmental injustice is in order to define what environmental justice is. So environmental injustice for me are communities that lived in areas that are heavily polluted. And by communities, I'm looking at race, I'm looking at education level and social economic level. And those communities that have been put in situations where there is a large amount of pollution and there is a burden, and there are a lack of economic resources to address those issues. So environmental justice is addressing those issues and looking at ways to shape policy and legislation towards fixing those issues.
Thank you so very much. Tuana.
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually going to read from the definition we use at the Chesapeake Bay program. So environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So that comes from the EPA definition of environmental justice, but we also have, it refers to decisions that support sustainable communities where people can interact with confidence that their environment is safe, nurturing, and productive. And that comes from that remaining part of the definition comes from Dr. Bryant at the University of Michigan School for Environment and Sustainability. So within our work, I think, at the Chesapeake Bay program, we're all about essentially restoring and protecting the Chesapeake Bay. So we're more thinking about it through a lens of that, sorry, that's my dog with his squeaky toy. We're more thinking about it through, water quality, ensuring that all communities have access to clean water, have access to green space. We're also looking at toxic contamination in water. So, or even, there was a study that came out from the University of Maryland, actually, Dr. Jacoby Wilson's lab, that looked at wetland projects in the state of Maryland and found disparities in where wetland restoration projects were happening in Maryland, disparities by race and socioeconomic background. So we're looking at all of those goals related to cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay, whether it is, fisheries, wetlands, toxic contaminants, et cetera. All those things we're working to apply an environmental justice lens to all of that.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Mariah.
I like the definition that Elena provided. When I think about environmental justice, I think about the injustices that people are experiencing from systematic racism and the structures that our government has had in place for a number of years and continue to persist. And we see that in our education and lack of resources and economic resources that those communities are being burdened with, in addition to pollution. When I think about our work and how we're approaching environmental justice, we're a coalition of a bunch of nonprofits who are working at the local, state, and federal level to inform decision makers on how environmental injustices are burdening communities and trying to do a bit of policy reform in those arenas. So we've supported a lot of that work in Virginia that Bakura is involved in, and have also worked alongside with Tuana and making sure a lot of our elected and government officials are embedding how environmental justice is touching all issues of the environment. It's not necessarily a separate issue when it comes to addressing agriculture or sediment runoff going into the bay. It's an issue that touches all areas of the environment, and that's really how we look at it and approach it.
Thank you. Thank you. Bakura.
So for us, environmental justice is one's ability to be able to thrive. In the context of our work, we don't see environmental justice as a land, air, and water situation. It is everything. It is schooling. It is housing. It is healthcare. It is employment. It is the ability of one to be safe in any area in which they choose to go in. And what we have and what we're fighting against is environmental injustice. And I think it's very important that we use that language because language is important. When we say environmental justice, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. But what we're fighting is environmental injustice. And I feel wholeheartedly that we should call it what it is and say that what we're fighting towards is environmental justices and being impacted and having those voices represented in these spaces, which you normally don't see. I am a rarity, which you see in environmental spaces. People are normally extremely educated, not from impoverished communities and don't have the education or the community support to be empowered to fight against those things. And so to have those spaces and to bring people in is what environmental justice looks like. And that's what we represent at the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for that response. Cynthia?
Yes, thank you. So I like all of the definitions that I've heard so far. I think the holistic approach to environmental justice is really the way to think about it, because you can't just solve one issue. In order to have communities thrive, you really need to make sure that you're addressing all the issues and addressing the systemic problems and everything so that the community can move to a place where it truly is thriving and not continuing to fight, battles on different fronts. I think Tuana mentioned the EPA definition. So officially, that's the definition that we generally work from at the Department of Justice, and focusing on, like I said, two aspects of that: the meaningful engagement piece, which is we're litigators at DOJ. And so we've got cases that either come to us from the affirmative side, where we're suing companies, or on the defensive side. And so we look to try to make sure that we are engaging communities because, quite frankly, they know best what's going on in their communities. And to the extent that we have the authority to do so, we want to engage them so that we know what kind of remedies we should be seeking, and in addition to the ones that EPA or some of our other client agencies are recommending. So that the concept of, talking to those who are being affected is something that we're really trying to integrate into our work. And the second piece is, I just mentioned about our remedies, looking carefully and as creatively as we can within the bounds that, the guidelines that we have, that we operate within, to see what it is we can do um, when we're settling one of our environmental cases. So, I'll come back to that holistic definition, because one of the things that I do is I work with other federal agencies at a different level on environmental justice. And, you can't, DOJ certainly doesn't have all the answers, and EPA certainly doesn't have all the answers. You need all hands on deck to address the issues that communities are facing. So thank you.
Thank you. And Jameson, how would you define environmental justice?
Yes, so I'll speak on behalf of the Environmental Justice Law Society, which is a collection of students at Vermont Law School who really focus on environmental justice through education, in terms of educating,
I think we lost him.
Okay, I think he's having some connectivity issues. So until Jameson comes back, we'll go ahead on to the next question, then we'll bring him back in. So my next question for the panelists is, what are some of the trends that you're seeing within the field of environmental justice, and where's the field heading in the next 5 to 10 years? And Mariah, can we start with you?
Sure. As far as some of the trends that I'm seeing from a personal and professional sort of perspective, environmental justice is becoming more and more popular. Slowly, more and more foundations, grant makers, governments are putting more and more dollars into the field, which is good. It's a good thing. But we still have a long way to go. To be very, frank, the environmental field overall is overwhelmingly white and male dominated. And the panelists that you see here today do not represent those individuals. So as somebody, and I can speak for some of my colleagues because I've worked with them in so many capacities here, we have our own sort of challenges when it comes to the funding that our organizations are receiving to carry out the work. So it's hard work. It's not easy, but it's a growing field, and I find that to be exciting and both rewarding when you're able to see yourself in those spaces, being able to make that transformational change.
Thank you. Tuana.
Sure, I would absolutely agree with what Mariah said. I would say, yeah, personally and professionally, but especially, since the killing of George Floyd and other recent killings of Black Americans, there's been in the Chesapeake Bay community and where I work, from, even though we've been doing this, at a maybe smaller scale relative, now it's becoming a bigger priority for the broader organization and our work. So we'll see if hopefully the momentum will keep going. It is exciting. It's unfortunate that it's taken, these national events to, in some ways, help push this, trigger this. Hopefully, I think, as Mariah said, as the years go on, I think this is gonna be, incorporated in all aspects of our work. Gonna be more of rather than a separate issue, something integrated into everything. And I was gonna say something else, but I forgot.
No worries. Thank you for that definition. All right, so Jameson is back with us. So Jameson, if you can answer 2 questions for us. How do you define environmental justice? And then where do you see the field going in the next 5 to 10 years? Now, Jameson, we can't hear you. Nope, still can't hear you. I'm sorry, seems like we're having some technical difficulties.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So apologies for that. The way we define environmental justice as far as the Environmental Justice Law Society is the intentional or the unintentional, often systemic targeting of communities of color, right? So, these communities bear the environmental burden, whether it's pollution, simply because of their racial or ethnic, composition and makeup, their socioeconomic status, in terms of their national origin, things of that nature. And so the second part of that is also the lackluster and oftentimes non-existent response from the local, state, or federal officials in terms of the government, and the ways in which they respond to these environmental issues that these communities are dealing with. And all that, in our eyes, is driven through environmental racism. And so that is the definition in which that we use. In terms of where do I see the trends of environmental justice in the last 5 to 10 years? I think, especially right now with all the social and economic, movement happening, social justice work happening, the conversation has really shifted more towards the intersections of environmental justice, something that, for us, people who are going through this and who have lived in these communities, myself, I lived in Hamden, Connecticut, where my middle school was built on toxic waste, where we had students that were, getting rare forms of cancer, teachers as well, 230 to 250 homes in that community, a predominantly Black community, being built on this toxic waste that, cause skin and lung cancer. So, we know the intersects of environmental justice, right? We know that environmental justice is also linked to housing. It's also linked to transportation. It's linked to economics and climate justice and civil rights. And so I think, because of what's happening at the national level, that's a lot of where the shift is happening for those who are kind of new to the game, quote unquote. But one area that I hope and pray that we go into is we really focus on the cumulative impact, right? And not just the cumulative impact in terms of what we can see in their communities and in their neighborhoods, but also the cumulative impact that we can't see. And what I mean by that is the synergistic effect of chemicals. And, there's so many chemicals that are being developed, and when they're being developed, they can't be in the same room, right? Because people don't know how they're going to react or what will be the synergistic effects of one chemical with another compound chemical involved. Well, Black bodies have all these chemicals within our bloodstreams. Black bodies have all these chemicals within our cells. And so that is something that we need to have the emphasis on and act on as soon and as fast as possible. We're okay and comfortable saying things like Cancer Alley when talking about, the Southern Black belts and things of that nature. That's unacceptable. And so I'm hoping that in the next 5 to 10 years, we figure out ways in which that we could really, study and figure out how our bodies are reacting to these pollutants that are just being instilled and thrown in our communities, but also making sure that the laws that are in place, environmental and civil rights wise, are both enforced equally. Because one of the issues with environmental justice is that these laws work and the laws are in place, but they're unequally enforced. And so they need to be equally enforced so communities of color can use them just as successfully as non-communities of color.
Thank you. Yes, very insightful. I'm hearing from a lot of the panelists about the intersectionality of it's not just an environmental issue, but a public health issue as well. Cynthia, where do you see the industry going in the next 5 to 10 years?
It's interesting because I think, I agree with what the other panelists have said. What I might add is because of the pandemic, it's really shown a light on the health disparities. Now, we all know, everybody that works in the field already knew when they started talking about comorbidity and other issues, we knew that, African American communities were going to be hit hardest, and other communities of color. And I think what the pandemic has done is raise the issue up to a national level, such that those who might have tried to ignore it before, you just can't. The numbers are there. They were coming out every day. And so I think that what I saw even before the pandemic was a lot of, at the federal level, some legislative efforts occurring, and even additional efforts within various states where they were trying to ramp up. Jameson talked about enforcement. Avenues to make sure that at all levels of government, at all levels of take place, but needing, I think, additional folks to enter into the field, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, in all job sectors. We need scientists, we need engineers, policymakers, we just need everybody. And at this point right now, you hear a lot of talk about environmental justice. Now, people are linking environmental justice and climate justice. So, the time is, I think, right for the field to really explode, but it's not just sort of one career track. It's all the careers that we need to help our communities move to that place of thriving.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that it's such an interdisciplinary field, that there are many angles in which you can enter the industry through. Bakira, where do you see the industry going in the next 5 to 10 years?
So for us in Virginia, we are trying to cause the industry to take a shift. And that shift is to be more inclusive. So you hear diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice in the workplace sector, which is still very exclusionary because it does not include the community. And so we would like to see people doing this work and being paid for this work that our impacted community members. It is entirely important that impacted communities be involved in this work, because they have to be able to be in a place where they are empowered and know what is affecting them in their communities. And we're not going to get that. It's going to be a constant same cycle if we don't start including communities in this work and training our community members. And so I see for Virginia a different look of environmental workers, environmental advocates that are going to be community members and that will be paid for their service. I also see a shift in how we get our grants, holding grant makers accountable for how they extend their money. So when you look at small community organizations, they're not able to grants, like say Sierra Club or CCAN or what have you. But we want the small grassroots organizations to be able to get, you know, adequate funding to be able to do the work in their communities. And so we are really trying to shift to a model that is extremely inclusive of community members, and being able to be honest about where we are with environmental justice within organizational structure, because the nonprofit organizational structure is extremely racist. And so we're trying to tear down those systems as well.
Thank you. Thank you for shedding light on the fact that we don't just need to speak for the community, or organizations don't need to speak for the community, but need to include the community as well. And that smaller organizations need to also be able to be competitive in the grant funding process. Awesome. Thank you. Elena, did I give you a chance to respond to this question?
No, but I will. Bakura, thank you for all of that. And I just wanted to make a note. Mariah mentioned that environmental justice is becoming this popular thing, which, you know, might be a good thing. But for me, I sometimes feel that that's not a good thing, because environmental injustice has been around forever. And environmental justice has also been around, but now we're just putting a name to it. So I think what, you know, this popularity, it's causing, it may not be, but I think sometimes it's causing more of an issue than it is a solution, because we have so many people competing for funding because they're saying we focus on environmental justice, when sometimes what a big green nonprofit wants to do in terms of environmental justice is not what the community wants to do. So I think it is important that we acknowledge that. And in terms of community organizing and community involvement, I think that that is where we need to go within the next 5 to 10 years. And, you know, with the organization I work for, I work with state legislators. So our goal is to put state legislators with community members in smaller organizations that don't typically get funding, because bigger green organizations are taking that funding, and to figure out what those needs are that they need, and then how they want to go about addressing those environmental injustices. And down the line, you know, we really would like to push for legislation that addresses some of those issues. And, you know, it is something to say that, you know, people are now creating environmental justice positions, but what we should be focusing on is the fact that environmental justice is tied to everything that we do in the environmental field. So another thing that I'm hoping within the next 5 to 10 years is that all legislation tied to environmental issues has an environmental justice component. It looks at what community members are saying those issues are and how we address them with funding and with their state legislators.
Great, thank you. Thank you so very much. All right, so I will ask about 1 or 2 additional questions, and then we'll open it up to student questions. The next question is about what you enjoy most about the work that you're doing, but also what is your biggest challenge? And I've heard a few of you talk about some of the challenges, but what do you really like about this work, and what are some of the challenges? Why don't we start off with Mariah?
What I like most about this work is that it's been able to connect me with Elena, Jameson, Bakura, and Tuana, and a lot of the other environmental justice advocates that I've had the pleasure to work alongside, and now Cynthia, and yourself, Christina. But it's a really small, tight-knit, close community, and I feel like we all really do have each other's back, and we're really just all trying to do the good work together. We all have the same goals in mind. So I think that we have the right people in the positions, you know, who are there. I think the challenges are exactly what Bakura and Elena were speaking to, about who is getting the dollars when it comes to this and who really needs it. There's a lot of not only political dynamics in our in our government, but there's a lot of political dynamics within the nonprofit community, and who is, putting those messages out there. So I think if you're able to land a career in this field, you're going to meet a lot of really good people, and you have the ability to make change happen.
Thank you. Thanks for reminding people how small the community is, but doing really great work. Jameson, why don't you share? What do you enjoy?
Yes, absolutely. Mariah hit it right on the nose in terms of the ability to meet some amazing people. But for me, again, it's a little bit more personal in the sense of what I enjoy about it, because as I said, growing up in the community where my middle school is built on toxic waste, our playgrounds, unfortunately, we found out as I got older were as well, baseball fields, things of that nature. So my brother, unfortunately, suffers from a kidney disease that he has had since he was in middle school himself, and is still today on dialysis and on the waiting list for a kidney transplant, which will be over 20 years in which he was doing so. And so, what really fuels me in terms of and what I am excited about when I'm dealing with environmental justice work is just the ability to assist communities in the fight, right? The ability to assist communities in finding ways to rebuild what it is that was taken from them, rebuild what it is that was polluted and without their knowledge or without their input. Find a way for them to be heard and to be assisted in their efforts to hold the polluters accountable. Because at the end of the day, this is just about neglect, and this is about intentional disregard for human health. And so for me, as a student of the law, I really look forward to the days of either writing briefs, arguing in the court, responding, whatever it is that it takes to put my people in a better position than where they are at that moment of time when it comes to my desk, wherever that may be. I can't talk enough about the connections that you make along the way and the amazing people. But again, we know that about ourselves. We know that about communities of color. We know that about low-income communities. The personalities in these areas are tremendous. Their fight and their resiliency is something that has been 400 years strong, right? And so to be embedded in that and to be within that and to help, as a Black man myself, find a way to really be at the forefront of the fight is really important to me. In terms of the challenges, I'll speak on the law student side of the challenges, which is, what area of law is the best area for me to have the biggest impact? Is it best for me to go into environmental law? Is it best for me to go and do toxic tort work? Is it best for me to do policy work and do draft legislation? And, should I be lobbying for environmental organizations? All these are different areas in which you can have an impact. Sometime before my law school experience, I would have thought, the way to have the biggest impact would be working for the EPA or something of that nature. But you realize early on that there's many different ways you can do that that don't involve necessarily dealing with national entities and, agencies, I should say. And so the challenge is really trying to figure out what's the best way I can have an impact. Is it a large firm? Is it a small firm? Is it nonprofit work? And so that's kind of where I'm in right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jameson, for sharing such a personal story, but then also speaking for someone that's in law school now. We might have students that are kind of listening who are considering additional education and law school. So that was really great. Cynthia, what do you enjoy most about your work, and what are some of the challenges?
I think the thing that I enjoy most about my work is when we actually have an opportunity to engage with the community and help them come a step closer to the vision that they actually have for their community, when we're able to make that positive difference by really listening to the community and doing what we can to help through our work and the tools that we have. I think the frustrating piece is that there are a number of issues that we don't have the tools to address, and I think by that I mean it's an area, a community has, as we've been saying, there are multiple issues, and we have authority over certain statutes, and others we don't. And so it's frustrating for me personally, I'll say, when we can't come in and help address everything. And I think for a lot of folks that I work with, we wish we had, frankly, wish we had more people um, that we could dedicate, solely to just working on environmental justice issues. And what I do look forward to our, because I just did a training for our, we call our honor grad class, which are students that have just come right out of law school. All of the people that are entering in, I would say now at least 50% of them are already familiar with environmental justice and have some background in it. They've done something related to it in law school, or they had a prior job. And so we've got a number of people coming in that are hitting the ground running with integrating environmental justice into their thinking and their work. And so to me, that's exciting. But as I said, the frustrating piece is that, we can't solve all the problems ourselves.
Thank you. Bakura, what do you enjoy most about your job and what do you find challenging?
I think both of the questions are the same. What I enjoy the most is being able to, and this was the hard part. Mariah, I'll tell you, so environmental. For most of you all, you won't have this experience, but being a community member coming into environmental justice work, it's a lot of judgment. So changing that atmosphere to be more welcoming, and standing on what I believe and what I see, and being able to be honest about that has been the most rewarding for me. So I'm like an environmental justice bully in my state. Like if I see something that is not right with it, and for an example, the Green New Deal, when it came out in Virginia, the language was that jobs would eradicate poverty. And I thought that, for one, that's wrong, and it doesn't. And in some instances, for some people, jobs can actually cause poverty. And I thought it was extremely disrespectful that they had that wording in there. And so I was the only one, the Lone Ranger, saying we need to change that language and explaining that. And eventually I was able to get that language changed, because I was going to build coalition against them if they didn't change it. But being able to really stand up for my communities have been the most rewarding, and not allowing other people to make decisions for my communities, and having that, that relationship with my communities, to be able to stand up, even when it comes to environmental organizations that like to serve.
We're kind of losing you a little bit.
Is special to me. What has been the most difficult is breaking down both systems. So because I have the community experience, and I'm able to tell what's happening, a corporate pollution.
Unfortunately, we're losing you. So I think you're coming out of bandwidth. Yeah.
Looks like she's muted too.
Yeah. Let's see.
Did mute me in the middle?
Yeah, it's muting you, unfortunately. And you're losing a little bit of connectivity.
Okay. I'll answer the question in the chat.
Okay. Well, no texting and driving, but we look forward to hearing your answer. All right. Tuana, can you tell us what's challenging, but also rewarding for you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely echo a lot of what everybody has said so far. Definitely, I think challenging is working in a predominantly white institution, organization, and just kind of helping others who have been, a lot of them have been doing this work for 30, 40 years, and they're kind of, stuck in their ways a little bit. They're good people, but, talking to them about these topics, it's uncomfortable for them, and doing it in a way, that helps to open their eyes a little bit more, and also like recognize the power that they have, and the power we have as an organization. That's definitely challenging, but I think, in the year and a half I've been in my position, we've been able to make some progress. So I'm optimistic, and agree that with Mariah that definitely my favorite part of this work is everybody I get to meet and work with. It's such an inclusive community that just gets it. So it's just like a breath of fresh air to be surrounded by these people. And there's just also like all the panelists are very inspiring. And also, we had several interns, and you all who are still, in your studies, who not too much younger than me, but younger, you all are also have been extremely inspiring to me too, and having had the opportunity to work with interns, and looking forward to, the new generation is going to take over these people who have been here for a long time. So I think that's really exciting.
Elena.
So I think I get the most joy out of what everyone else saying is working with community members. And I just want to talk a little bit about my last position with Namati, where I was the environmental justice director, and I was able to hire 8 community members and was able to pay them to pretty much work on the environmental justice issues in their community. And what I appreciated most about that is that, being the lawyer and having that educational background, I wasn't telling them what they should do. I was there to assist them to help them solve their problems. So I would be the one to teach them how to write a comment letter, to teach them how to go to hearings, to voice their concerns, to show them, where to look up certain codes, and just to give them that opportunity that so often people in environmental injustice communities don't have. And I think with this new role that I'm in, working with legislators around the Mississippi River, I am excited to teach state legislators that they also need to do the same thing. And sometimes, what might be a priority for them is not a priority for their constituents. And just to look at environmental justice as a health issue. So, my work is under the environmental health umbrella. So just being able to tie those things in together. And with challenges, I think one of the biggest challenges is not being paid enough sometimes. Being honest, environmental justice work is very difficult, and it is a very particular field to get into. And sometimes when you start off, you don't get paid a lot. And being honest, when I first started this work, I didn't get paid a lot. But over time, my mother always said, do what you love and the money will follow. Over time, I found myself getting paid more and being able to argue why this is an important sector and why it should be treated like every other environmental issue that we're working on. And another challenge that I have, or that all of us may have, is that it is such a small field. I work out of the DC office, and I know everyone on this call, or I have interacted, heard their name. So one of the challenges is, how do we make it more broader? And one more challenge is, all of us that are working right now that are on this chat, we are from a younger generation and we're working with others that are well educated in environmental justice issues that they have experienced during their lifetime. So how do we put what our elders feel is important or how environmental justice should be addressed with what the new millennial generation thinks should be priorities, and how do we bring those together and that knowledge together?
Great, thank you. And I think we still have to hear from Jameson. Jameson, maybe you can talk from the perspective of a law student. What do you enjoy most about law school, and what are some challenges? And then you've also done internships and things of that nature. So maybe working in environmental justice, what were some challenges, but also rewarding?
Yeah, so I did answer, but I can definitely speak more, to the law side if you want me to, no problem. A lot of it was really just said by Elena, which is, the thing about, so the crazy stat about law is that 1% of lawyers are African American males, right? We add our sisters in there, that go as high as maybe 2 or 3. And so when you get into, as Elena said, the specifics of environmental justice, now you're talking about being the only Black person in the room 99% of the time when you're having conversations with other attorneys or you're having conversations with, corporations or organizations. And so really, having the capacity to do that, because what you end up finding yourself doing is you end up finding yourself doing a lot more teaching than what you want to, having to help people see what it is that you find so important, right? One of the hardest things to be in this world is be a woke Black person, right? Because you always have to let things slide. Otherwise, you drive yourself insane, right? And you go in these rooms and you argue, and you talk about, this is what my community members are going through. This is what my people are going through. And you have to really, educate more than what you're comfortable doing, because you rather do the work that you came here to do. You rather do, the draft writing or the research or whatever the case may be, but yet you find yourself being the educator of the office or the educator of, whatever, situation you find yourself in. So that is definitely, one of the biggest challenges, if not the biggest challenges, is to let, white people know that it's not your job to educate them on everything environmental justice. I look at environmental justice as being honestly the biggest threat that we have in our community as people of color. Part of it is because, we may not understand all the ways in which environmental justice is affecting us. Unincorporated communities are going through completely different issues as incorporated communities. Climate gentrification right now is really big in Miami and coastal areas. Who's going to help these low-income communities of color move inland and move in different safer places when it comes time for that to be the case? Where are the funds going to come from? Are we planning for that now? If not, why? Why don't you have the same sense of urgency as I do? Why does it take, me to be in the room to have these certain conversations? So these are all just challenges that, you find not just being a law school student, but just being, a person of color in the environmental field, in a predominantly white field that focuses on conservation and focuses on, animal protection, which is A-okay. But at the same time, we are no less than any of those issues. And so on the legal and law side of things, that's where my frustration and challenges would be.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking so candidly. So in the interest of time, I want to get to student questions, and we have a few student questions that are in the chat. I won't have every panelist answer it, but you can kind of answer the questions that most apply to you so that we can make sure we get through all the student questions. And the biggest question that we're seeing right now from students in the chat is about internships, jobs, and other opportunities. So if you have internships or jobs for students, can you talk about them, or can you talk about how students might be able to obtain opportunities within environmental justice to not only figure out if this is the right field or industry for them, but also to gain experience and build their skills?
I'll speak briefly because I know this is something that I raised with my organization. We do have an internship. We actually have a couple of internships. They are paid internships, which is very important for people that are in school. So I work for the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, and what we are trying to do is include environmental justice in everything that we do. We have different programs. We have conservation, we have environmental health, and I forgot the other one. But in particular, my program, the environmental health program, we are looking for an intern to focus on not only environmental justice work, but on plastics, zero waste, Mississippi River water quality issues, so environmental issues as well. This is a completely remote position, so you don't have to leave your room. And like I said, it is paid. I think we will be accepting applicants until December, and I'll give the information to Christina. And then in terms of finding areas where you can practice environmental justice work, I would say using job boards. That's how Indeed was my best friend when it came to environmental justice, and using your resources. So all of us on this panel, we have interned in some shape, form, or fashion in, the environmental arena and the environmental justice field. And we always get emails. Tuana is definitely a good person. Yeah, she'll probably talk about it, but yeah, just using your resources and networking opportunities.
Great, thank you. And if you have links to anything, you can kind of put in the chat, or you can follow up with me as well, and I will send out an email to all the students that have attended with opportunities.
I'd like to add something to that if I can, Christina. I think that, like Elena said, like we've all had internships, and some paid, some not paid. You really have to hustle. Seek mentoring when y'all are looking for these jobs. It's good that you're a part of this panel because you're able to kind of talk to people who have had some career experience, but continue to network and seek out opportunities like this. There are several conferences that I'll just name that you probably want to get plugged into that are welcoming to students. Dr. Jacoby Wilson, who's in the School of Public Health, he just wrapped up with an environmental justice and health disparities symposium. He hosts that every year. It's open to students. There's another conference called Festival del Rio that focuses on Latinx outreach. That's something you want to attend. There is Taking Nature Black. There's a lot of really great conferences in your area that you can attend. But yeah, connect with Tuana too, because she always has a lot of jobs that are out there and available to students.
Anyone else want to contribute to the internship? Oh, okay, Tuana said she sends out tons of internship opportunities, and she dropped her email address, so great. Another question was, I know someone talked about, or people have talked about in the past, how interdisciplinary environmental justice is, and that we can take it from a wide variety of angles, that we need lawyers, we need scientists, we need policymakers. We have a student that's a biology major interested in focus on informal environmental education and hands-on advocacy. How would they connect to positions like the ones that she's interested in? So informal environmental education and advocacy. I know some of you already talked about that, but if you had any other specific resources for maybe someone from this natural sciences realm.
I work in the advocacy space. We lobby federally and at the state level. So I'll share my contact information, but we're also connected to a ton of groups, over 250 who are working in the environmental education space as well.
Great, thank you. Another question is, I noticed that several of the panelists have maybe law degrees or even master's degrees. Would you say it's more beneficial to have a law degree or advanced degree in order to have a bigger impact in this field?
wouldn't say it's more beneficial. I would say it's required at this point because the job market is so competitive. So all of us are finding ourselves going to school to further our education to be more specific in what it is we want to do. In terms of my law degree, only go to law school if it's really what you want to do, because sometimes there is no money in it, and you're doing it because you love it. Um, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
So I will piggyback off that, Elena, which is you're absolutely right. Don't go to law school unless you want to go to law school. But I mean, do I think it's needed, or do I think it's beneficial? I think it depends on what you want to do, right? Because if you want to be at the with the frontline communities in the community, you don't necessarily have to have a law degree. There's a lot of things you can do, tons of things you can do with environmental justice that does not require you to have a law degree. A lot of times you can just sit with somebody like Lena or myself or anybody else who has a law degree, and they can kind of walk you through what some of the procedures and processes are in your state and in your community. And then you can take it from there and take off, right? Whether that means starting a nonprofit on your own, whether that means, building a coalition. There's no end and there's no ceiling in terms of what we can do as a people together, regardless of whether we have degrees or not, right? I chose to go to law school because I felt like that was the best way for me. Part of it is because I do feel like the way I grew up was a little bit privileged in my Blackness because I'm allowed to go to law school, right? Yes, I'm going to be in tons of debt when I get out of law school, but there are so many people in my family that I know wouldn't even have an opportunity to go to law school. So the fact that I had the opportunity, I felt like I needed to and I should. So therefore, I could try to have impacts in areas where I didn't see people who look like me in those areas, right? So I chose this route. But this isn't a route that you have to take. There are routes that you can take that do not include any additional degree outside of undergrad, and doesn't even require undergraduate degree. Bakura is to me a great inspiration in terms of what you can do at the community level. I'm meeting her right now just with you guys, but as passionate as she is, I know for a fact that she's somebody who I would love to be on the same side as her, fighting with her. That doesn't take a degree. You know what I mean? You don't have to go to school for that. That's passion and that's leadership in ways that, experience teach you, right? So is it beneficial? Only in the ways in which you want it to be beneficial. If you want to be in a courtroom, if you want to be, working corporate jobs and having impact on that side, if you want to be, doing some of that work, yes. Is it needed? Absolutely 100% not. Right? Pick up a couple of your local laws and just read through it and find out what the requirements are in terms of public comment. Find out what the requirements are in terms of, if there's a significant comment, how they have to respond to that, right? And hold them accountable, because really at the end of the day, what's happening in these communities is that these corporations aren't being held accountable. And the reason why they're not being held accountable is just because there might be a missing educational piece in terms of what the process and procedures are. And a lot of times, the local government that doesn't do a good enough job of explaining that to the community members, right? If you live in an unincorporated community, there's tons of things you can be doing in terms of trying to educate yourselves and your community on ways to protect yourself. And it, again, doesn't require a degree of any sort. So I hope that kind of answers the question in terms of, it can be if you want it to be in certain situations, but it's not a requirement whatsoever.
So there was another question in the chat that asked about if you want to pursue a career in environmental policy, should you get a law degree? And I'm gonna make the assumption that says you don't have to, but I wanted to also hear from Tuana, if you can talk a little bit about your pursuit of a public policy degree and what made you choose that. Because I know we're hearing from the lawyers in law school, but you're pursuing something a little bit different. So you can talk about that.
I think Mariah was the one that's studying public policy, right, Mariah? But
sorry, Tuana, Mariah.
That's okay. So yeah, I'm getting a master's in public management in the School of Public Policy at Maryland, but no, you don't have to have a policy degree to do policy work. I think you just have to know how to understand the law and I would agree with Elena and the other lawyers on here that unless you want to practice law, don't go into it. But yeah, I think the simple answer is no. You can get really involved. Volunteering, signing petitions, writing letters to the editor, doing all of those things with local environmental groups or other social justice groups. All of those skill sets can be taught and can be learned. I think you just have to have an interest in it, and there's a lot of really great resources that are out there that can get you involved in the civic engagement sort of level. There's also a lot
I don't have a degree and I do public policy. So just in case you want to, I do policy all the time. And I don't have a degree.
There's a lot of really great leadership programs out there as well that you don't, if you're seeking additional education, you can seek out those leadership opportunities that you don't necessarily have to go to get a master's degree for. That's not why I'm getting a master's.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think almost what you studied doesn't always even matter. It's more like the connections. Honestly, like literally every job I've had, except for maybe 2, I heard about through a friend or a colleague. It really, connections are super important. So, if any of us, on the panel today, the work we do sounds interesting to you, send us an email, make that connection, tell us a little bit about yourself. Just doing that, I think will help a lot.
So what I'm hearing from our panelists is that you should study what you are interested in. There are lots of ways that you can build your skill set in environmental justice by just being a part of a campaign, by volunteering, by getting involved in your community. And then also networking is key, because as you see, a lot of them know each other. And the community is small, as they mentioned. So those are 3 ways that students who want to break into this field or industry can do so. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I wanted to, there are no other student questions. So I wanted to wrap up and end with some final words. If you all can kind of share major lessons learned or what students should kind of keep in their back pocket as they think about this industry, as they continue on in their academic pursuits. Any final words that you might have for students?
The only thing I'd say is continue to be true to yourself and don't forget why you started this or why you wanted to start your journey in environmental justice. I think we've all talked a lot about challenges, and you're going to meet people who are not going to be receptive to doing environmental justice work. More and more organizations are getting questions from people like you all, young people who are coming in and saying, what's your statement on diversity? But not just that, what are you actually doing? Who are you hiring? Who are you funding? Where's that money going? So continue to ask those hard questions and just be true to yourself and authentic to yourself.
For me, it will be to find out what it is exactly that you want to bring to your sector of work, and stay really, really true to that. And if it's something that's new, then invest in that idea and sell it. I am a firm believer that you can do anything that you want to do with or without a degree. I'm definitely an example of that. And it didn't take very long, but to be very true in this work and be honest. A lot of times you'll see people are afraid to stand up for what's right because a lot of people are not doing it. And policy is one of those areas where you'll see that. And so a bill may get completely gutted out and they're saying, well, we got one of the things that we wanted. Don't accept it. Keep pushing. People are worth it. People are worth this fight. And so you just got to really know that this is what you want to do. And it's painful, but it's rewarding at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Cynthia. I think
Yeah.
I would share. Sorry, Jameson, were you gonna say something?
No, Miss Cynthia, please.
Okay. No, I was just gonna to kind of echo what folks have already said. I think really your path doesn't have to look like anybody else's. Once you figure it out, sort of what's your career anchor, what really drives you, what excites you? Do you really want to work directly with communities, or do you want to be in some other aspect of the work? And then begin to craft and build the career that you want. You know, you look at the examples, you network with other people to see, well, okay, well, how did you do that? I'm interested in that piece. So I'm going to pull from that. I'm going to pull from this. And you begin to build the career that you want. I think there is, you know, there is room for everyone, and making sure that, you know, you remain, like was said, true to what you want to bring to the table, and making sure that you understand, you know, you need to be flexible at some times. At some point, you may decide that, okay, I know my endpoint is I want to be here in 5 years. This position doesn't look like it's going to get me there, but I'm picking up the skill sets that I need to take me to the next level. So I'm going to do this for a certain period of time, and then I'm going to move on. But I think, you know, I try to make sure students understand you don't have to duplicate anybody else's path. You can make your own based on what is right for you, and where you're headed.
Completely agree with what Cynthia just said, because, you know, that's one thing we're realizing in this field is that it's not vertical or horizontal. There are bumps and just potholes that you encounter. And I think another thing is, when you have an idea, the worst somebody can do is say no. So never hold your tongue if there is something you're really passionate about. And I know from experience, you know, joining the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, where I started off as a fellow and then was hired to do litigation work just on water quality issues. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to do environmental justice work. And I made that clear when I interviewed as a fellow. Like, one day I want to work on environmental justice work. So I pitched the idea, and I'm like, the worst they can say is no. Thankfully, they did not say no and said yes. So, you know, and I realized I hated litigation. I didn't want to do environmental litigation anymore. So I created a different path, took a different pothole, and ended up somewhere else. So don't be afraid to voice your opinion about things.
Yeah, what I'll say is, to piggyback off both of those, both Cynthia and Elena, is don't allow yourself to be pigeonholed into what others think environmental justice is, whether that be institutionally, whether that be your own understanding, or whether that be somebody else's, right? Because the thing about environmental justice that we spoke about earlier is that it intersects with so much. And that's a gift and a curse. Elena spoke about the curse a little bit in terms of, you know, unfortunately, things possibly being watered down and getting in the way of community organizations that are doing the work. But the gift side of that is that you can get jobs where before environmental justice may not have been thought of as an issue, right? But you can go in there and you can help them realize that environmental justice is absolutely directly or indirectly part of what is going on. So don't be afraid to take something that may on the outside seem like it's not environmental justice at all, but then once you get inside and you realize, oh, well, this is agriculture, or, you know, this is economics, or, you know, this is, you know, whatever the intersect is, transportation. Environmental justice covers all of that. It absolutely does. And so don't be afraid to, when you go into an organization or you go into a job, to speak up for these community members, speak up for yourself, speak up for your family, or speak up for anybody that you know, and in hopes of helping others see the connection. And then once they do, you know, you can ride that wave all the way to whatever environmental justice job you have within that organization or another one. I'll piggyback off of something Cynthia said in terms of, you know, especially if you're coming out of undergrad or you're coming out of grad school and you're getting that first job. It may not be the job that you hope, and it may not have as much environmental justice in it as you like, but a lot of times those skills that you learn is preparing you for the job that you're going to be getting next. So just allow it to happen. But again, just be resilient, and don't be pigeonholed into thinking what others think environmental justice is. Stay expansive and stay true to yourself.
Thank you. So if there are no other last words, I will conclude our panel. If we can show our last slide. I just want to thank you all for attending our Careers in Environmental Justice. I want to thank all of our panelists for putting on such a great discussion around the topic. They all came from a wide variety of professional and educational backgrounds, and I hope that students, you've learned from them. Hope the one thing that you've learned from them is about the value of networking. And our panelists, if you are agreeable and you are allowing students to contact you, either drop your email in the chat, or I can follow up with students tomorrow or in the coming days with your email address as well. So students, again, thank you for coming and attending. Just want to let you know we have a wide variety of career events through the University Career Center, specifically our professional preparation workshop series. You see we have quite a few events that are coming up. For more events, you can always check out our events page, careers.umd.edu, and go to our events calendar. So thank you again for coming. If you have not signed in as of yet, we will also link the sign in the chat. We would appreciate if you can sign in for us so that we can record your attendance. If you have any other questions, feel free to stay on for a little bit and I will conclude the recording. Thank you.